The second type of satellite that we're going to learn about is also an Earth observation satellite. But it is dual use. That means it does two things. It also looks outwards. What do I mean by outward? Sure. This satellite specifically looks at the sun. Alright? It's cool, I don't know. I do actually. Alright, this satellite is currently sitting in a box. I've seen the box. About, I don't know, 15 minutes from my house. I took a tour. They won't let me open up the box, I tried. Its abbreviation, I need to throw more letters in you. Discover. That's not actually its name. It's called the Deep Space Climate Observatory. Deep Space Climate Observatory. The thing that's unique about this specific satellite is that it's in a type of orbit that we don't currently have an Earth observation satellite in. Can anyone name an orbit? Yeah.
Low orbit.
All right. How about non-elliptical orbit? How about geosynchronous orbit? Geostationary orbit? How about elliptic? How about polar elliptic? No, it's none of those. It's in an orbit called L1. Lagrangian point 1. L1. L1 is really far away from the Earth. Like a million miles. It's far. I don't know the exact.
You're pretty close.
Yeah, it's just about there. I think it's like 975.
Yeah, almost, yeah.
Two things that this does. The first thing it does is it looks for solar storms and flares. Does anyone know what this is? It's like when we have a hot day. Wait, it's actually not. What do you think it is? Solar flare. Right, I'll tell you. The sun. Right? Is the sun solid like Earth? Kind of. What's its crust made up of? Rock. Rock's not hot. It's made up of like fire and gases and things like that. So the fire is always moving around, right? So what will happen is there will be little outbursts of fire.
Oh. Yeah, hit the Earth before.
That's called a solar flare, and it sends like hot signals towards the Earth. What do you think is the problem with this? Two main problems. It actually doesn't make it too hot. What? Not radiation? Yeah.
It wrecked the satellite?
It wrecks satellites. That's definitely true. We actually had one like a couple weeks ago. It wasn't very strong, but it can majorly damage our satellites if it is strong enough. If it's even stronger than that, it absolutely kills the electrical grid.
Oh.
What does that mean?
It's like no lights.
No lights, no TV,
It happened before.
no power. What else can you think of that might be important? Does Taiwan have any nuclear power?
Yeah.
What happens if there's no electricity for the nuclear power?
Goes to backup.
Yeah, it can only be on backup so long. It gets rough. What would happen is this satellite would be in L1 orbit, and it would be like ding ding ding, like Scott having a solar flare right now. Shut down your electrical grid so it doesn't get absolutely destroyed from the solar flare. And we would have like 30 minutes to just shut everything off.
Earth out.
So like, you know, you might not have your, you know, whatever kids have these days. Like Guitar Hero.
It's all your own.
Alright, so like you might not have that for a while, but you know, you'll have it again in 3 hours instead of 6 months. Do you think people might go a little crazy if there was no power?
Yeah.
What would happen? Like, who's had the power go out at their house before? Alright? What happens to the milk in your fridge?
You give it to your mom.
I wouldn't give it to anyone. You give it to your what? Your cat?
Or just quickly go to the fridge and drink.
Sure, you can quickly drink it before it gets really nasty. But, so there wouldn't be a lot of food, and we would have problems with that. Right? Yeah.
What's the possibility?
There's actually very good evidence that we're having something called a Carrington event, which is the intersection of an 11-year and another cycle year that I forget, solar event that hasn't happened since the 1800s. And we didn't really have electricity back then. So, but I don't know. I think it's kind of improbable. But you can be the judge of that. Alright, Deep Space Climate Observatory. I said it looked at the sun. What else does it look at? It looks at the Earth. Climate Observatory. What do you think it does? Yeah. The what? Here, speak up. Speak up.
The weather.
The weather, kind of. Who's heard of this thing called global warming?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Who thinks it doesn't exist? Yeah, it definitely exists. So what happens when the ice caps melt? Okay, so
We go to Mars.
let's say I live in a low-lying area.
You drown.
Like how far above sea level are we right now?
Like 0.
Like 0. I don't actually know that. But what happens when the ice caps melt, which causes the sea level to rise?
Power floats. And you swim
Like
in
it-
the ocean.
The water rises and people have to move, right?
They can swim.
So let's say this is all water right here. All right? This is my country. But it's not actually. And this is the country next to us, all right?
Is that Taiwan?
No. So this is the country of Scott, and this is the country of evil people who hate Scott. All right? What happens when Scott floods? Where do I have to go? All right. Do you think they like that?
No.
All right. So you can see why it might be important for us to track sea level rise. So then we can be like, evil people who hate Scott, don't be alarmed when all of the Scots come screaming and running across your border. Right? Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about the Deep Space Climate Observatory? Yeah.
Again, the same question. NASA has a budget of what, about $4 or $5 billion a year for Earth science?
The problem with it is that there's no budget to actually launch the satellite. So it can't explore or develop space right now because there's no funding to launch it.
Are there no NASA satellites that currently do monitor?
Not in L1 orbit. So you can see the difference is that it's not like SBSP where it's like a large system that definitely isn't happening now, but it's smaller apps that are more strategic because there's not a whole lot you can say against it. Like SBSP, you can be like, that costs a ton of money, but for Discover, you could be like,
What if someone says we already are monitoring solar flares though, because we know when they happen?
it's not an O1 orbit.
Okay. Why is that important as opposed to being in another orbit?
I would actually have to look at the evidence for this, but I have a whole block to why that is true. We have like, on both MDA and Discover, you will shortly get like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of evidence. Like answer to every disad that I've ever heard read against it, answer every counter plan I've ever heard against it, things of that nature. Now you might not understand those things yet, but believe me, you will. He's like, oh God. Yeah.
But we already have that, right?
We have it, but it's not beyond the mesosphere, and there's no budget to launch it.
Then it's useless.
So the affirmative would just launch a satellite. Does that make sense?
No.
What?
But if they...
Look, I can launch my pen. Apparently it was like illegal to launch my pen. Yeah.
But you can launch it like, you put it under the sea, and like there's like...
No, like,
And it flies off.
like look, here's Florida where Mr. Washer lives, and you got like a station right here that's got a rocket.
So big.
Yeah, and it fires up and shoots into L1 orbit.
What do you think money is? Just store it in the sea, an earthquake.
I mean, you know, sure, the sky can turn orange, yellow, purple, and green, but it's probably not going to happen. You know, I could become president. Probably not. I can sense it. All right, does anyone have any questions, other questions, before we talk about the next type of satellite? Sure. So the next type of satellite is very different because it's not exactly a satellite. It's an idea of what to do with satellites that includes launching some satellites. It's called... Where did I put the eraser?
Oh.
Operationally responsive space. Oh goodness, that's just like a bunch of words strung together. What do you think that means? Yeah.
A thing that you can make a thing up to space.
It's how the military positions its satellites and what it does when there's a threat to a satellite and what we can do to make our military satellites better. So the first thing that this encompasses is nanosatellites. Anyone know what this is? Any guesses? Yeah, really tiny satellites. Does anyone know what a satellite looks like now?
Yeah.
It looks like a school bus.
Yeah.
What if it was like this big?
Wow. Nanosatellite. Oh, nanoschool bus.
What do you think's harder for another military to shoot down? A school bus or this MacBook Air?
A school bus.
Well, the school bus might be harder. You never know.
Yeah, it has armor.
You know, maybe the school bus is in outer space and like the laptop is like right there. All right. So nano satellites. You see why this could be strategic. The other thing is that how many satellites can we put on each rocket to send them up?
100. One.
How many MacBook Airs do you think we could fit in a school bus?
A lot.
A lot. So what would that do for? What would that do for our cost of launching satellites? We could save billions and billions and billions of dollars. I broke mine. I gave you this one.
What can I have a cookie off?
No. Can you give me $1,000 American dollars? All right. Next thing. Hardening. Does anyone know what this means? Hey, stand up. Stand up. She's a satellite, right?
What? Yeah.
What if I put a skateboard helmet on her?
It's gonna be heavy and small.
Do you think it would be different if I knocked her on the head like this or with the skateboard helmet on? Right? You can sit down now. What is in space? Space junk, space debris. What happens when it hits a satellite? Here, I'll give you all an example and think about this because this really scares me.
Okay.
International Space Station. It has escape ships in it, if you didn't know that.
What?
There are 2 of them. They each fit 3
They can run
people.
away.
The sensor that they have in the International Space Station went off last week and said, hey astronauts, space debris is headed right for the International Space Station. Get in your escape pods now, you might have to evacuate. Alright, you all are astronauts. Who would be scared out of their mind? I would definitely be scared. Right? She's like, I'll rough it out. I've seen the Fantastic Four. I get some sweet superpowers. Yeah.
Like you float out and you push the space station
Well,
away.
what actually happens is they've got little boosters on the International Space Station, and they were able to like sidestep it, so they didn't have to evacuate.
Did the debris?
No, it didn't hit. What would also be the problem?
Are those rescue pods able to re-enter back
Yes,
into?
they're Russian made. They're the I forget what they're called.
But there's no gravity. You can just push it.
There is a little bit of gravity. All right. Does anyone know how much we spent on the International Space Station?
Like a lot.
Like hundreds of billions of dollars. 120, something like that. Do you think it would stink if we lost to that? Yeah. Probably be money not well spent. Like if, you know, if I just bought my MacBook Air and decided to throw it into the ground, that probably wouldn't be a good idea.
You can try. I'll take it.
I will not try. So the same with satellites, right? They cost a lot of money. All right. The other problem we have is what if someone attacks our satellites?
We attack them back.
We could attack them back, but maybe it doesn't hurt as much if they're hardened.
We push it away.
Okay. Now I'm going to get into another point. All right. This is another kind of operationally responsive space. Rapid reconstitution. Does anyone have any idea what that means?
No.
All right, I'll tell you. What it is let's say I have a satellite that's hit by space debris. I have the ability to rapidly fire another satellite that's the same thing where that satellite was.
That's nice.
That would be pretty
Oh,
cool,
what,
right?
What if it gets hit by a space debris again?
Well, then we'll launch another one. That's why it's called rapid reconstitution. And this kind of also goes hand in hand with something called launch on demand. So like, let's say I have to discover. Right now it'd probably take a while to like get it out of the box and ship it to Florida and have it launch, right? Launch on demand would be like Charlene, launch, discover, 10 minutes, or, you know, I'm gonna throw you in the ocean. Do you think that would be good? All right, here's my question posed to you. Why would the military want to do this? Sure, trouble's going on. What's a world war?
It's a war that continues.
A war that encompasses the whole globe, right?
Right.
Do you think that's good?
No.
Do you think it would be better if instead of having a world war, like the United States just fought Canada instead of the whole world?
Yes.
Sure. So this allows us to regionalize conflicts and stop them from spreading globally. Yes?
Wouldn't somebody argue that because it's really a military thing, that it will incite other nations like China into a space war with the U.S.?
Yes, that's what a lot of people say. There's very good evidence that this stops. Well, a lot of this evidence is written in response to the ASAT launch that China made in 2007. If you don't know, if you think ASAT is like word soup or something like that, it's called an anti-satellite weapon. And the problem is that China launched this to destroy one of their own weather satellites, and we're just like, oh, we need to get rid of this weather satellite. But like, it pretty much showed that they could offensively attack any satellite, which is why the military was like, we need to harden our satellites, make them stronger, and have the ability, if they hit one, to launch it up immediately. So a lot of this evidence will actually talk about China. You did? That's good. The other thing that's also important about these 3 satellite apps, and why I think they're uniquely good, is that people write about them. And not only do they write about them, they've written about them in the last 18 months. Why is this important?
Very recent evidence.
Yeah, what if I had an app that was like, the United States should launch Sputnik? Right? I'll read some evidence from the 1950s. It'll be awesome. Yeah.
Scott, I have a kind of a question.
Sure.
When we're looking at this, or when our students are debating this, and the judges are listening to the debates, are they very U.S.-centric? So in other words, if in the end you can prove, well, this is best for the U.S. interest, would they look at that as being more important in judging our affirmative than say what might be best for the globe or what might be best for other countries?
I mean, that's yes and no. I would say that most affirmatives will argue that it's good for the they'll either argue that it's good for the United States or good for the globe, and normally those things unfortunately don't go together.
Right.
And then
The judges, though, what's going to be there? Will they go towards what's good?
both ways.
Okay.
So, well, for instance, like, I could say on the affirmative that it's more important for the United States to do it because it's good for, like, the U.S. to be a leader and, you know, kill Afghanis and whatever they do. And on the negative, I could say no, that the European Space Agency should launch your satellite and the U.S. stinks, right? And like, you might think this is funny, but like, people argue this all the time. Like, there are a lot of reasons why the United States having leadership and having the most powerful military allows us to do things that are really just not right. You can disagree or agree, but it's probably...
But there's no one way the judges look at that.
No. Most people will judge it two ways. The first will be how it's argued in the debate, and the second will be the evidence that's read in the debate. And you are about to see some evidence. Lots of it. Any questions? I have a question for you. All right. How fast do you talk in a debate?
Very slow.
All right.
How many words can you read in 4 minutes?
How many?
750 to 8.
750? All right. You've noticed I've talked a little fast? Kind of like upbeat, like talking to you all the time. People that you're going to debate are going to be fast. There are ways to counteract that, and there are ways to sort of get your mind to listen to that correctly. Like, you don't have to go fast to win a debate. I was probably like one of the slowest debaters in the history of debate. But, yeah.
Can you just ask for the case?
Sure. So one of the things that we'll talk about is called backflowing. All right? And I'll give you an example of it right now. I'm going to read evidence. And once I'm done with the piece of evidence and I flip it over, she's going to read the evidence
Oh, great.
and be able to transcribe that. So she doesn't actually have to listen to me up here like, the United States government just a bitch like her since my sex money shouldn't have only done it. Like, she doesn't have to listen to that, because, well, she can, but if she doesn't catch it all, you know, I read it, and I'm like, you know, U.S. thinks, blah, 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 and then she has the evidence now and can be like, oh, I had no clue what he was saying, but this card says that, you know, operationally responsive space is the coolest thing since, like, Pokemon. Alright? So, like, there are ways to counteract this. Like, and sometimes the slower debaters are more persuasive. Like, there have been very competitive collegiate champions who just, you know, whether they couldn't speak fast or were lazy or anything like that, you know, I can be persuasive. It's just a matter of, you know, you can't go on a rant, right? You can't be like, well, it's just like, you have to be efficient, you have to get the point done, you have to move on to the next point. Does that make sense?
Except that if somebody's reading 20, 30% faster than you, they're getting 30% more points in than you are. Isn't that an issue?
Sure, but if I'm like, that doesn't matter and my one argument is just smarter and better than yours. I mean, that's the type of debater that I was, at least. And I thought that was better than just like eating mindlessly until you can't talk anymore. So like it's not like first round when you debate someone that I've coached and they read fast. You shouldn't be like, oh my God, I'm in for it, I'm done. It's like, no, this dude is talking mindlessly, has no idea what he's saying, and you know, at the end of the debate, it's going to be like, that was great, but you lose. Also, like, let's say you're debating in front of like your mom, right? And like some kid gets up there and he's like, the United States should launch Discover because it's the coolest thing ever, and you need to be able to do this in order to understand everything that's going on. Like, what's your mom's gonna be like? You need to go to the hospital. Right? So like there are good things about going slow, and like let's say she read really fast. Like she's gonna be biased towards reading fast, so maybe she doesn't talk as fast as possible, but she'll still talk in a rate that the judge can't understand, and she'll still be talking a little faster So, like, there are judges that you want and can do better in front of. Does anyone have any questions before we take a little break? Alright, you can take 5 minutes.